Mic's on.
So the audio conference got to hear us, but the Zoom missed my intro. So
The whole Zoom missed intro. Can you not? Can you? If you can't hear us,
yeah,
wave if you can't hear
they
us.
can hear us now.
Hey, they can
Yeah.
hear us now. All right,
Maybe
fantastic.
the button on the computer clicked. So I'm a total like rookie. You guys,
You're
keep
getting worse
pin
at
on
this.
me.
You used to be better at this. What happened? I mean, you were like automatic for a while there. What happened?
Greg's wearing him out. He's been doing these meetings
Oh my
night and day,
gosh.
almost meeting
He's
with
probably
delegates. So.
locked my computer for
It's
like
hard enough.
8
I'm
hours.
so happy to have people hear you torturing them. You're making them work for it. They can see and they can't hear. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our town hall. If you can hear us, look, it's a tough election cycle where normally in a historic year like this, where it's an open seat for governor, we haven't had an open seat where you haven't had an incumbent governor running. This is amazing to think of since 1992, and I remember that 1992 state Republican conference. It was a doozy. It was a lot of excitement. We're not going to have that. We're having a virtual convention where Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you as delegates are going to be able to vote. But it's also a little challenging because we can't meet in crowds. We can't feel the energy. We can't be there with you. I was fortunate to have in January and February and the first part of March live meetings. Can everyone hear me? Make sure I don't hear my own feedback. But since this has started, we haven't been able to have those meetings, and so we're staring at a camera, and that's a little harder. And I think my paranoia is that I'm not able to, and we're not able to reach every delegate. So thanks so much for being here tonight for this town hall. We're going to try and get through as many questions as we can, and I'm going to turn some time over to my running mate. I don't know if you're not all aware, or if you don't know who Washington County Commissioner Victor Iverson is, you should. He is he's been elected and reelected as a county commissioner in Washington County, St. George. That's the largest small county in the state of Utah. They have grown and prospered in spite of the odds being against them. He's a conservative. He worked for Senator Lee as his public lands director. They get the lowest tax rate as a county in the state. He likes to brag about this. And they get a year's worth of rainy day funds in the bank. That doesn't happen by accident. Believe me, I know how public service works and how budgets are built. You got to be a fiscal conservative to pull that off. So I'm going to turn some time over. He's also he's a past president of the Association of Counties, which means all the county commissioners, county council members from the state elected Commissioner Iverson to be the president of that association. So you're talking to I have a running mate who understands local government in the deepest level. So Victor,
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. I just want to thank all of you as delegates. I really have to admit that my introduction to politics, my introduction to being a grassroots worker was back in 93, 94. It was right. I always remember that year because it was the year that Newt Gingrich took back the Congress, and that was a great year. But I, like all of you, attended my neighborhood caucus meeting that year. And I can remember that my neighbors were there. It wasn't a big group. And one of my neighbors says, "Hey, Victor, you're young. You're interested in politics. We should elect you precinct chairman. We should elect you a state delegate and a county delegate." And then they gave me a packet and told me to go drop it off at one of our people's house there. But I have to admit, it was that introduction that has really made me fall in love with this process that we're in right now. I have to admit, this year is awful strange in the fact that, we're talking to each other via Zoom, via Facebook Live, but it's a wonderful opportunity to interact, take your questions. And like Greg said, I grew up in Washington County. That's where my family and I live. I'm serving my second term as a Washington County Commissioner. I absolutely love my county, but more than importantly, I love this state. Utah is a beautiful state. The message that we're taking out is that prosperity throughout this state is important. It is critical. It doesn't matter what community you live in, what county you live in. If your community, if your family's prospering, then all of Utah's prospering. So in reality, I think we bring together kind of what we would call a Utah unity ticket. And I didn't really. Somebody asked me, how do you get to be the lieutenant governor candidate? And I have to admit, I believe in Greg Hughes. I believe that he is absolutely the best candidate for governor. And I told Greg Hughes that I said, look, I want to support you. We need a bold leader. We need somebody who can solve problems, somebody who can really tackle the challenges. And I actually had that conversation with him prior to what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. And I'll tell you, we are facing some challenges, but we live in a wonderful state, a resilient state. All of you are a part of that. This election isn't as much about us as two individuals, but us as a state, and you guys are a part of that. And it's also about our values as Republicans, our conservative values, our belief in the Constitution and rule of law, and where we're going to go from here as a state. And I absolutely have confidence that Greg Hughes has the proven track record, and that's why I support him. And so when he asked me to come on as Lieutenant Governor, I was more than happy to, and because I believe in this mission.
Okay, so if you're ready, we're ready. We'd love to open it up for questions, and let's get to it.
All right, so we have a question. The first question, we're going to bring on David Allred. I have a chat from David Allred. He actually just doubled up with two questions. So David, we're going to have you pick your favorite one right now, and then we might come back around and get a second one here. So I'm having a little trouble unmuting your mic. So if you're able to, you might not be able to unmute it on your end.
There, I'm unmuted.
All right, there we go.
Hey, David, how's it going?
Okay.
Hello, David.
So just a question, how are you better candidates than any of the others that are running?
Well, I'll tell you this. I think that you're looking at a team of demonstrated leadership. You have a battle born. I was a public servant and a part-time legislature, meaning I had to have a business. I have a small business, and I had to have a day job. But in that time as well, I served as a public servant in our state legislature, and I served 4 years as the majority whip and 4 years as speaker before I decided not to seek re-election. I finished that term at the end of 2018, so I'm a recovering legislator. But I've been through the issues, and if you want to shake up the status quo, or if you want to do something that's impactful, you're going to get a lot of pushback. You're going to get attacked from a liberal media. You're going to have special interest groups that will attack you and threaten your elections. I'm a conservative. I'm a supply sider. I know that the sky's the limit for the state of Utah. And I said this from the very beginning. I was running a message of leadership. Steve Jobs says, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes politics can feel like a little bit of ice cream sales going on. I'm not selling ice cream. From day one, I wanted to be able to tell the truth, let everyone know it's okay to have even sometimes uncomfortable conversations, to let you know that government can't be all things to all people. But Utah is an amazing state in that, tough times don't last, but tough people do. And that is the heritage and history of the state of Utah. And so I bring to this race a track record. What I will state in position, I can point to by way of action, having served as a public servant. And that was before we got into a pandemic, where I think these times that we're confronting are now in the category of unprecedented, where I think that leadership means that much more. I bring that experience and that ability to lean into those tough opponents and the tough opposition with a deep conservative rudder in the water. And it was important for me to have a running mate who's cut from the same cloth, who also has gone through that as a conservative and with a conservative perspective. And I'll let my running mate answer why he thinks this ticket's different than the rest as well.
Well, David, I think it really comes down to what I consider bold conservative leadership. So a lot of people can win elections, and they can do all of the pomp and ceremony that an office requires of them. But it's taking our values of individual freedom, limited but effective government. Government needs to be limited, but it also needs to solve problems. And that's really what you have in this team. You have in Greg Hughes, somebody who's really going to roll up his sleeves, who has the intellectual curiosity to dig in and solve complex issues, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's how do we expand prosperity across this state to make sure that we stop exporting our children out of Utah. We're the youngest state as far as our age, and that is a wonderful asset, but it also comes with challenges. It means that we're going to have more and more pressure on our transportation infrastructure, housing, and so on and so forth. But what you have is somebody who won't look to a big government solution, but will look to how he empowers the private sector to really solve these problems. It is that leadership that I think is unique to this ticket. All of the other candidates are wonderful human beings. All of them love this state as well. But I believe in this idea of leadership, and I've seen it in my own experience in government, how critical that is.
All right, we appreciate that question, David. Thank you for joining us. All right, so our
I don't think your mic's on.
oh, my mic's not on, man. I'm Greg's giving me the look right now. I'm messing up tonight. He's gonna, oh man, no, I make it sound like he's harsh. He's not at all. So my mic's on now.
I told him now.
I got everybody. I get like my wife texts me when my wife's not on too. So I'll get like 4 messages in the Zoom, and
By
I'll
the
get
time
like
you left, I
a
told
thing.
him.
Yeah, like so. I got somebody coming in the other room. Mike's not on. I know my wife's called me and texted me twice now. So anyway, our next call is from phone number ending in 2014. So 2014. I'm going to bring you live. You can just, if you just want to give us your name and go ahead and ask your question straight to Greg and Victor. Are you there? All right, we're going to go to the next caller. We had another caller come in, phone number ending in 7549. So 7549. If you're there, then you can go ahead and ask your question straight to Greg and Victor. That's the last 4 digits of the number, 7549.
Hi, Greg. My name is Lonnie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Lonnie, thank you for joining us. Can you hear us okay? We're having
Thank
some
you.
mic trouble right now. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, I hear you fine. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry if this is an awkward question, but you seem like a straight shooter. So
Sure am.
one of the concerns that I've had goes back a number of years with your candidacy is something to do with some property with UTA that you were involved in selling. And maybe you've answered that before. I have no idea. I would just like to know. Do you have an answer for that for me, for the people listening?
So it's a recurring narrative that I've confronted as I've tackled large public policy issues. I've never owned any land nor made any profit off of any land that UTA has. I have land as small properties that were on 200 West that a business partner and I purchased in the late 90s prior to public service in the House or being on the board of UTA. I was asked by the Salt Lake County mayors to serve on that board of UTA for some time to bring a conservative perspective. But I owned that land and disclosed that, and that was all prior to any public service. But after that, anytime that I've weighed in on impactful issues, be it UTA or if it's moving the prison or if it's Operation Rio Grande or it's the inland port, there seems to be a narrative that I own all the land or some land or profit off of land around those things, and it's not the case. And the one thing about land, and this is what's nice about land, is you can admire land and you can covet land, but if you want to own it, you have to have legal title, which means there's a public record to that land. So when you see these, when you see some of those narratives that are out there, you can verify who owns land by the title of who owns property. And so it's one that is, I think people tap into the cynicism when you see someone that gets passionate about policy. There's people that think, why is he so excited? It must be something in it for him. But I've never profited off of any land related to UTA.
Thank you for being so direct on that. Can I ask one other question?
So
He has another question.
There,
Sure.
Yeah, do you have another question?
Yeah.
Yes.
We heard him. I guess you
Oh,
didn't.
okay. Yeah, sorry.
It's just with regards to President Trump.
Yes.
Some of us like the things that he has done, but have a really hard time with some of the things that he says. And we're at least for me, I am trying to, and I know that you're a strong supporter of him, and I know most Republicans are, but there are some of us Republicans that have serious concerns about, I guess, his actions and his lack of diplomatic skills. And maybe you could, since you met him personally, maybe you could tell us a little more about your support of him.
Yeah. So I want to answer that a couple different ways. First off, you're not alone. I think that his style is a look. I am the pioneer in my family. Okay. And what that means is that I came across the plains to come to Utah. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I didn't come in a handcart. I came in a Suzuki Samurai a long time ago, right after my church mission. And I had to learn, having grown up back east with a family that's talks with their hands as much as I do, that brutal honesty is not a virtue in Utah. Honesty is, but not the brutal side. And I have to be honest, it took me a while to understand, that maybe the way I grew up is not a way my personality rubbed people the wrong way. I'll just tell it honestly. I think that some of that style, or the way that Donald Trump, as a candidate and as president, the way he is so direct, it isn't what we've seen in presidents in the past, and it is in that brutal honesty category. One of the things I did like about him because of that is I had grown tired of the focus groups. You have people that will focus group the color of their tie. I know that I don't think anyone thinks that the word focus and group are ever put in the sentence when we talk about President Trump. But let me tell you a side of the president that's sad that I don't think people appreciate as much. And by the way, he's probably the most criticized and attacked president in modern history easily. This is a man that is inquisitive, and he is someone that's accessible, if you can believe it, much more than a lot of the other people that have served as president. He's someone that I was able to, when he was seeking support from leaders in the state of Utah, I was able to meet. I met his son, Don Jr. When he came to Utah to announce the Bears Ears, that he was pulling back those national monuments that President Obama created at Bears Ears, and then the Staircase Escalante National Monument that was, again, another overreach from President Clinton. When I met him at the bottom of the stairs of Air Force One, my wife was with me. And as he came and spoke to me, he remembered that I was a supporter from the beginning. And he put his arm around me, and he put his arm around my wife, and he told my wife, Krista, he said, this Speaker Hughes, he's been with me from the beginning. And then he looked at my wife and he asked about my children, and he asked about our family. And that's a line. It's kind of, usually when you get in those lines, it's kind of like shake hands, keep moving. And there's a couple images of that where he has his arms around the two of us. And my wife's been with me in the political arena, or at dinners or experiences for quite some time. And she left that experience believing or feeling that he had asked her more questions about our family, and had seemed genuinely interested in her and myself than she had experienced before. That's a side that I know that the media never portrays, or that people seldom learn about. Another side is that he invites. When I was the Speaker of the House, every Speaker of the House, he wanted us to come to the White House and meet with his cabinet members and give us a directory of departments and divisions we could call within the executive branch to get to answers. Commissioner Iverson, as a county commissioner, he invited county commissioners and council members and lawmakers from Idaho and Utah together to meet with cabinet members and the vice president and department heads and division heads, and did this all over the country with states. He has done more to reach out to states and locally elected officials than any president ever has. And so those are some of the qualities that really do not get reported on, that I'm glad you've asked me about, because I want to share that. I know there's a brutal honesty and there is an abrasiveness to the way he handles, especially those that attack him. And he is not without his critics. They are as large as we've ever. The line is longer than any we've seen. But there is another side to him that I would argue is more accessible than any president we've ever had. And I'll tell you, on some of these critical issues, states' rights, we've never had a stronger president that wants to return rights and sovereignty back to the states. Pro-life, we've never had a president go to the pro-life rally in Washington, D.C. and speak to that rally. Ask Senator Lee about President Trump's passion about that issue. He would say that, from Senator Lee's words, we've never had a president more committed to pro-life than President Trump. And so that's my personal perspective of the president, if you're asking.
All right, we're going to go to another question from Zoom. We have Okay, my mic's up. I panicked for a second. I thought I was going to get a bunch of questions. I was like, did I? Okay, so we're going to go to another question from Zoom. We have Remington who has his hand raised. So I'm going to unmute your mic there, Remington. If you want to go ahead, you're live. If you want to ask your question to Greg and Victor.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Greg and Victor. Good to be with you. Question for you. So something that's unique about this convention cycle is that we're doing ranked choice voting. So, right, so that means as a delegate, not only can I go with, my top 1, top 2 pick, no, I have to stack all 7 of you in order, which is becoming quite the challenge. There's lots of good candidates for governor. So my specific question for you guys is, I want to take a play off of what David said earlier, and I want to go a little deeper. So I want to know why I should stack you higher than Jeff Birmingham or Amy Winder Newton.
Yeah, my answer to that is measurables. What we've done. I will tell you that if you go back to my first year as Speaker of the House, first off, you have 75 members in the House. In the first term as Speaker, first 2 years, we had 63 Republicans. Now that might sound like an easy way to move policy and legislation with 63 Republicans, but remember, when you get that broad in representation, you have seats in West Valley City that are represented by a Republican whose constituency doesn't look anything like rural Utah. And you find as you get a broader caucus of Republicans that coalescing around policies and issues becomes even a greater challenge. In 2015, the pressure to pass Obamacare expansion was like we've never seen. It had our governor, lieutenant governor, it had the Senate president looking to expand Obamacare expansion. It's we don't want everyone to seek health care through our emergency rooms, and we needed to have a plan to help people that were in need. And the terrible irony of Obamacare expansion is it was leaving out the poorest among us. But the free money is not free. And there is no no conservative version of federal money that gives states more rights or greater ability to manage and structure its own budget. And so we in the House, as large as that caucus was, it was a strong sentiment that we could not accept that federal expansion of Obamacare. And we had, again, the kind of pressure where we had the liberal media coming after us. I had cartoons of me as a gangster with a Tommy gun shooting a doctor in the rotunda, and me with monsters, Freddy Krueger and Jason from Friday the 13th, and we're hovering over a child in a wheelchair. We had liberal special interest groups that planted crosses in the lawn of the Capitol and accused us literally of murder. We had them threatening and mailing into districts, threatening our re-elections. You could feel the fear. There's 2 things as Speaker that I could sense. I could sense that fear was contagious, but courage can be contagious as well. But when you start to feel that pressure, people start to get worried, especially in some of those swing districts that you have in the House in some of those areas. We had to hold strong because we knew what we were saying was right. We knew what we were doing was the right thing for the state of Utah. We needed to stay in control of our budget and help people, but do it in the way that we knew we could deliver on the promises that were being made. And I'll tell you that I don't think you have a candidate, and I don't care, you can go deeper down that list that you just described, that's been through that refiner's fire, of that liberal media attack, of the special interest groups attack, of the Twitter storms and the social media trying to shame you out of even having an opinion, having that fear and combating that fear that comes with the pressure and that's why they do it and why they create that pressure. I don't think you have a candidate that's been through that and come out the other side. And what you get in me as governor and what you have in Commissioner Iverson as a running mate is you have leaders that have demonstrated ability when the pressure has been on and when that opposition has been the highest. I would say in the case of Amy Winder Newton, she was in support of Obamacare expansion. She was part of that. There was a big group. She wasn't alone. I mean, the lieutenant governor was part of that. The governor was, so was Amy Winder Newton. There was a lot of Republicans looking at that plan. But again, I will repeat, there is no conservative version of Obamacare expansion. And so what you get, if you're asking, I know it's a long answer, but the difference between me and the other candidates is that I am battle tested on the conservative principles and and the way forward for this state that will make sure the state is prosperous and will come with its resistance and opposition. And I'd like the commissioner to maybe mention what he sees different in the field compared to us as a ticket.
Yeah, just to add on to what Greg said, I think really as you look at the choices that all of the delegates have, you really have a kind of more of a moderate Republican, which is acceptable, and a conservative ticket. Our ticket is the conservative choice in this race. And it's also the conservative choice that can win in the June primary. And it is also the conservative choice that is proven. And you can campaign as a conservative, but to lead as a conservative means that you really have to be committed to your fundamentals. It means you really have to always ask the question, is this the proper role of government? Can government do this in a way that doesn't impact people's lives? Can we do this in a way that doesn't take more taxes or create more regulation? To govern as a conservative requires experience. It takes fortitude. And I would say that we do have more experience than the two candidates. Having said that, I mean, I know Amy because I worked with her as a fellow county person. I have tremendous respect as a human being for her. I consider her a friend. Jeff, I know less of, but I'd also say that the experience factor with Jeff, it needs to be weighed as well, or the lack of experience.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we did have a question, another quick question. God, man, I'm missing my mic tonight. I'm all off my game. I don't know. I didn't have enough caffeine today. I think that's probably
Red Bull. This guy.
So if you are unfamiliar with ranked choice voting, you do have to list all of your choices in order. You don't necessarily have to list somebody for you don't have to list the whole 7 or whatever it is. You could go down, or I think it's 6 on the ballot. You could go down just a certain amount. There were some people that were asking that in chat. So if you only have 1 and 2 and you don't want to vote after that, you don't necessarily have to. It would just be like if you left after a certain number of rounds in the standard convention. So we're going to go. The next question is going to be from Tyler. So Tyler, I'm going to unmute your mic here and you can come on. You can ask your question straight to Greg and Victor. Are you there, Tyler?
Hi, Mr. Hughes. I would consider myself a constitutional conservative.
Is Tyler on my
Tyler.
screen? Is that the Pittsburgh Penguins hat on? Is that Tyler?
Yeah. When you said Pittsburgh Penguins, I was like, yeah, go Pens, baby. I got
that's right. I'm missing this season. I love the hat. Good to see it.
It's killing me. It's killing me.
Me too.
So I was just wondering what your opinion on if the general government was created by the individual states or the people as an entire nation as a whole.
Yeah.
And then also, what are your thoughts on a state's right to nullify unconstitutional federal laws?
I love both those questions. We are sovereign states. We came together and said, look, states, we need a federal government for currency, for defense. We are the boss. The states are the boss. That is the way it was intended. And we know that it's gotten away from that. The federal government acts as if it's the boss. It is not. That sovereignty lies. All rights rest with the states, except for the ones that we allow and articulate for the federal government to do. We can nullify. And I'll tell you this. I'll give you a behind the curtains example. It's not official nullification, but what it is it's a way that states can absolutely stand up for its rights. And should. And well, first off, the one that blows my mind is marijuana and gambling. Okay. Somehow marijuana, states' rights is all the rage when we're talking marijuana. Every 35 plus states said the federal law says this, we're doing that, and here we go. Now, I don't know why we can't get that passionate about lands, because I think I could do more with the lands, but I'm not ripping on the marijuana. I'm just saying marijuana seems to be the only topic where states' rights rule the day. And now I think now, like FanDuel or the gambling now is states' rights too. But I'd say that lands have to be that. But let me tell you an example where Utah flexed its muscles as a state towards the Obama administration that I'm proud of. I think it was the second shutdown. Again, this is inside baseball. People don't know this story, I don't think. the Obama administration decides it doesn't like that the Republican Congress hasn't put into the budget its Planned Parenthood and some of the other things that it wants. So Obama is shutting down the entire federal government until he gets a budget he wants out of Congress. And his design in doing that is he wanted to create as much inconvenience and pain with the American people as possible and blame the Republican Congress at the same time. One of the ways to do that is to take all the national parks and shut them down. So he shut down all the national parks. And as you can imagine, in the state of Utah, we have people from all over the world that come to our Zion's National Park, come for tourism. And we had the rangers that look, they work for the federal government. They do what they're told. They take the fence or the gate, they shut it, they put the padlock around it. And we have people lined up along the road with nowhere to go because this government shutdown happened overnight and people are stuck. The economy and in that area of the state, southern Utah, is closed down and people don't know what to do. There was a particular county attorney and county sheriff that had a belly full of the games that were being played at the expense of the people of the state of Utah. And they gave a courtesy call to the governor and legislative leaders to say, we're not asking, we're letting you know. We're going to take bolt cutters to that chain and we're opening that gate. And we're letting those tourists come into this park. And we're done with this, with the nonsense. We're not going to hurt people over the gamesmanship inside of Washington, D.C. Well, the governor calls the Obama administration and says, we have a bit of a situation here. No one has asked for our permission. It's happening in real time. They are on their way. We would like to do this in a more orderly fashion, but we're going to have to hurry because this is how it's going to happen. It's going to happen anyway. So what happened was the Obama administration rushed an agreement with the state of Utah that we could open the gates. The state of Utah would cover the cost of having that park managed and letting the people go inside. And then once the federal government was reopened, they would pay back the state of Utah for the cost that we incurred to open it. Because of the decision to go ahead and open that and really inform the governor that was what was going to happen, we had the only national park in America. The Grand Canyon stayed closed. Yellowstone stayed closed. Yosemite stayed closed. The national park that stayed open, it was the one where the people where you had a county attorney and a sheriff that were saying, we're done with the nonsense. And I think that's what you're talking about at the end of the day. You're saying, look, the people and the states were the boss. And I think that if we have the courage, we don't want to be painted as extremists. We don't want to be painted as radicals, and we're not. I tell you that story that not a lot of people know because that's an example. And I don't think that was radical. I think that was people that were just not going to play the political games inside the Beltway in this state in Utah. And I'm going to tell you, as governor, that's what you get with me. And I know that Commissioner Iverson, it was closer to home for him. He knows that episode very well. So that's what you get in this ticket. You get a governor and a lieutenant governor that absolutely knows that the sovereignty and the rights start with this state. And we don't wait for our marching orders from back in Washington, D.C.
And Tyler, just to add on to that, a lot of times states have by accepting federal programs, federal funding, they basically give up a lot of their federal powers. And so as a state leader, a state governor needs to really weigh in and consider, what are they giving up when they take a federal program? Because those federal programs always come with some sort of state match. So you're locking up a portion of your future state budget for that. Often they come with a lot of regulations and backgrounds that burden the state down. So I feel like there's quite a few times in federal programs where basically the states almost sell their federal birthright, if you will, back to the federal government for some sort of bowl of porridge or federal program, some little carrot. And so you need a leader, and Greg is a proven leader in that category, that's willing to say, no, it's not worth the cost that you're going to bring onto my state later. Because having the freedom of your budget is a tremendous freedom that states need.
That's huge. And go Pens.
That's right. I love this guy. Yeah. He's got a Grizzly. He's a hockey fan right there. Go Pens. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I grew up in Utah. We don't watch hockey. So.
Oh, be quiet. I'm telling you, I love hockey. I miss it so much.
Okay. So our next question, we're going to go Aaron Bo. I'm going to unmute your mic here, Aaron. and then you can correct how I'm saying your last name. So
Last name's Baugh, and I appreciate you let me give my question. Greg, you've been in some land development and so on, and I'm sure Commissioner Iverson's seen his fair share of that down in Utah County. And I don't know, I'm just kind of worried. We got a housing issue up here. I'm a house owner here in Salt Lake County, and I see the traffic issues go, and they're going to get worse. And heaven forbid this Olympia Hills thing gets past us. And if I don't know what Cox is going to do about that, but anyway, or how he's going to shut it down or try to help us, who knows? But what is your vision for helping to spread things out, yet keep things, affordable? And maybe that's the key. I keep thinking that maybe the issue is we just need to spread people out so we can afford to buy the land to get out there and maybe the hinterlands, but at the same time, we can at least have our families a little closer. So please, I'd love to hear your vision for that.
You hit the nail right on the head. You answered it. Here's the play. And I'm going to tell you, I was fortunate enough to have live town hall meetings in January, February, and the first part of March throughout the whole state. And I knew these things on a policy level, but it really all came together as we had these robust discussions, just as you're observing right now. You've got two things happening in the state of Utah right now. In 4 counties, which is the Wasatch Front, 130-mile valley, it's a bowl. In Utah County, Salt Lake County, Davis County, and Weber County, you have a little over 80% of the state's whole population living in that 130-mile 4-county Wasatch Front. You've seen the lion's share of infrastructure by way of water, roads, rail. You've seen the job growth and corporate expansion, relocation, job growth happening, hyper-focused in 4 counties out of 29. Now we get outside of the Wasatch Front, and what do you find? You find that there are at least 22 counties that have never known a day of economic opportunity, that every young person that's our future infrastructure of workforce, kids growing up, they leave these communities across the whole state, and where do they go? They come to the Wasatch Front to try and find a job and make their way. At the same time, because we have a high birth rate, we have all these children that we're not China. We don't limit you to 1 kid per household. So by just internally, 60+% of our growth as a state comes from within our own homes. And then you have such a strong economy. We have people that come from outside. But if we know we're growing from within, inside the Wasatch Front, I have 3 children. My oldest daughter, she's 21 and she's in her 3rd year at college. And I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. I don't, as a father, forget candidate, as a father, I don't want them to say to me, Dad, I can't afford to live here. Right now in the Wasatch Front, we have congestion, traffic congestion, congestion failure. We have a scarcity of housing. We have more demand for housing than we have supply. But then when you get outside the Wasatch Front, the world changes completely. What this ticket is doing and what our vision is for governor, lieutenant governor, is we have to do exactly what you said. We have to grow the economic pie. There is an opportunity and potential for cost of living to be lower, quality of life to be higher, and to see economic opportunity through infrastructure investment of water, rail, and roads throughout the rest of the state of Utah. Now, Commissioner Iverson comes from Washington County, and I would argue they're the largest small county in the state at 200,000 people, and they've grown in spite of all the odds being against them. One of the things that we've done in the Wasatch Front is we have a governor's office of economic development that has said we will incentivize economic growth, and we'll define economic growth as, and it's a post-performance. It doesn't provide seed money. It's after they're here and they're providing a tax base. But the one lone measuring stick for economic growth in the eyes and the mission of Governor's Office of Economic Development has been jobs, and a certain median income of those types of jobs. Well, if that's the only thing you're looking at, okay, then the only place you'll ever bring a business to take advantage of those incentives are where your populations are the largest. And so it just perpetuates itself. We have to break that cycle. And you know what? And the way we do it politically, because I had a great town hall meeting in Richfield, and I had this it was a lunchtime meeting, and I had this older gentleman, and he raised his hand. I love going down to rural Utah because people just talk straight, and and they, brutal honesty, they do actually love the brutal part of honesty. It's okay. And this gentleman said to me, and I'm saying it the nice way, by the way, he'd probably say it short too. He says, I've seen all you candidates running for governor come through town, every single one of you since Rampton. And you all fall in love with rural Utah, and you all say that, you know, you're going to not forget us and we're all going to get taken care of. And then you get elected and we never see hide nor hair of you again. Why would you be any different? And that's a tough question. Okay. And that's why I was so glad to have these meetings. And in my mind, when he asked that question, at first I was getting a little defensive. I was thinking, well, we've brought, you know, you got SUU, and we've got, I was thinking in my head the different things that we might have that I could argue that, you know, we have not forgotten rural Utah. But then because he was asking it for a while, I realized he was right. And so I said, when he was done, I said, I'll tell you why it's been that way up until now. And that is, you don't have the math to elect a governor. I live in a town in Draper of 47,000 people. And this county that we're standing in, I think, was 10,000 people. And it might be, Rich might be 27. But anyway, San Juan County, 17,000. Grand County's like 10,000. Sevier County, what's that? 27,000. Yeah. Anyway, point is this. You don't have the math, rural Utah. That's why you haven't. I said, but this is what you get in 2021. The interests and the needs of the people that live along the Wasatch Front today or going forward in 2021 align perfectly with the rest of the state of Utah. Perfectly. You are now one state. The Wasatch Front needs a relief valve. They need to see their young people that can find economic opportunity without leaving the state, but to stay here, but to can live somewhere else. You have cheerleaders. If they don't want a 300-unit apartment building next to their neighborhood, they're praying for Richfield. Yep. Right next to I-70 and all the the manufacturing and opportunities there to be successful. They are your biggest cheerleaders. That's why politically we're going to be able to make it happen going forward. You just have to have a governor that can connect those dots and do those things. That will address your traffic congestion. That will address your scarcity of housing and the cost of living that's going through the roof. And I think you can do it quickly.
And spread the prosperity throughout the state. I mean, my county is the smallest, fastest growing county in the nation. But a lot of people talk about growth, and I have to remind them we have 40,000 kids in our school districts in Washington County. They're going to grow up. They're going to want to live there. But I always make the comment, we are going to grow in Washington County, but we need to grow without losing our soul. So it's about spreading the prosperity throughout this state. And that's the way that we maintain livable, workable communities throughout the state that are prosperous.
For you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank
so
you.
we had a quick follow-up on that. We had somebody ask if you're for the inland port. They said that would bring a lot of, they said this will create a lot of jobs in Richfield. So
yes.
Is that something that you're interested in, Greg?
Yeah, I just get a lot of looks because I take too long to answer questions because I just go on too long. I'm sorry. This one's not one that I can answer quickly, but I'm passionate about it.
You've really set it up, though. You framed it with this whole discussion.
We've talked about infrastructure investment. We've talked about bringing economies to the whole state. Here is the play. Inland ports exist around the world successfully. What they are, and we have them east of the Rockies in the United States. Every coastal port, you will find those busy ports bottlenecked. So you'll have ships and shipping containers that wait out in the ocean a month sometimes waiting to get in. The rail lines that come out of coastal ports, there are inland ports. There's one in Louisville. There's one in Kansas City. And again, they're all over the world. It's a logistics solution to get containers in and out of this country. Those, the imports coming in, the exports going out to get inspected, U.S. Customs inspected, stamped for delivery, either, inspected to leave or inspected to come in. So we know this.
Why couldn't you just say yes?
Is that,
yes.
We have Gene on?
Is that my ombudsman? I have a town hall ombudsman that watches that I answer things too long. The answer is I do. Yeah, the answer is yes. I do support the inland port.
Okay.
Sorry, Gene.
Was that Gene or was that someone else?
Yeah. So I guess
it's Jan Starkey.
Oh, Jan Starkey.
Jan.
So Gene Arbuckle's usually our ombudsman, but now you are. You are the one with the gong that gongs me when I take too long. Sometimes I try to frame it because I want people to know there's so much opportunity in a system of inland ports. You've got every coastal port in the West Coast that all comes in by way of rail lines into the state of Utah somewhere, not in the same place, where you can create regional U.S. custom bonded ports. And then we have a road system with I-15 going through starting in Alaska through Alaska or Canada and America and Mexico. You know the rest.
Yeah,
so
I've listened to some of your other town hall ones, and I have another question or just something. You guys ask if we want to open up businesses for economy.
Yes.
And I really do. I'm in that precarious age of over 65.
Yes.
But I've got lots of kids and grandkids and some great grandkids, and I really think we need to open it up in the counties that are low COVID, and I think we need to keep caution in the areas with the testing if they come from the hot counties into the lower COVID counties. And I also had a suggestion, but I don't know if it would be approved. But I think that we should do a test by having our senior students return to their high schools for this last month, and then have an individual high school graduation for them with 2 parents only allowed, and then to do the fever and COVID questions, and after that kind of reevaluate and see how things look.
So
because we have such low COVIDs in most of our counties.
Yep.
So Dr. Kennedy, who ran for the U.S. Senate 2 years ago, he supports, he's a friend of mine. He was in the House. We served in the House together, and he's a friend. He's endorsed me in this campaign. And we sat here like this in a town hall meeting last week, and he suggested exactly what you did.
Yep.
And he's a physician. He's a doctor. He believed that there is that opportunity for seniors, just the seniors, to be able to have that last month of their senior experience and have that graduation, and be careful about that. And he is also an advocate of getting back to work plan. But it was the first time I had heard that suggestion about our senior. Look, my son is a senior. I mean, he's missing all those experiences.
I think it's inspired.
I
think it would be a good way to try it out in the lower COVID counties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Utah is a kind of, we are more prepared than other states are in dealing with so many parts of this COVID-19 problem.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'll tell you that my running mate, Commissioner Iverson from Washington County to my left, I know that he's in close. He has a physician that runs their health department in that 5-county area, and they do feel like some of these decisions that are being made are not. They're impacting the counties differently that have different levels of cases or community spread of COVID-19.
I think the way you set it up is really kind of what our policy is, or what we've been advocating for, is we need to open this economy back up when we still have an economy to open up, but yet we need to caution those who are in the vulnerable population, and continue to practice good health practices, social distancing, things like that. But we need to get back to work.
Most of the seniors that I talk to, including my husband and I, we are fine with staying safe and not going to the stores and having our kids do shopping if you have kids, and that we're perfectly fine. This isn't killing us at all. It's kind of half enjoyable and half boring.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think you can still go outside, go for walks. I mean, there's a lot of good things you can do. Even go into the store just as long as you wash your hands and be careful.
I'm out digging in the garden and doing some things like that. So I'm fine. And we go for rides, and we go through drive-thrus to pick up, Subway and In-N-Out burgers and Beto's and stuff like that. So
I will say in Washington,
we're not hurting.
In Washington County, we're going to host a drive-in theater this weekend at our fairgrounds. We had another one, so it's bringing back the drive-in theater. This is pretty good. People can't go to regular theaters, so we're going to be doing these drive-in theaters.
I love how the free market has found ways to solve some of the challenges that we're confronting right now. It's fun to watch the ingenuity happening before our eyes. I do want to say though that people's circumstances are different, and I do know that there are bills that come due for many Utahns every 30 days, whether they're a business owner, large or small, whether they're just they work and they are head of a home, support a household, and understanding how you pay your bills every 30 days, you've got to know. And there is no way the government will print enough money to replace an economy. So we have to.
Well, I think that's where in Utah, like the next time I pay my donations, I'm going to put an extra 100 into fast offerings and another 100 into humanitarian aid.
Yes.
Because I know in New York, those poor people do not have enough supplies. And I know the women are supposed to jump on the thing of making 5 million masks.
Yep.
And yeah, so I think that we can, as a state, Utah State, I think we can help our own, and plus do some humanitarian aid along with it.
Thank you first for pulling me in on my inland port question. I think I'd still be talking about it if it wasn't for you. Thank you. I was on a roll there. So. I was just going and going. So thank you very much. What a great observation. Thanks for the questions and keeping us in line. Stay on the line. You could just like gong me anytime if you think I'm going too long.
Yeah, please do. So,
okay.
We're really working on that. Like in theory, he's supposed to be able to answer the infrastructure in rural Utah and the inland port all at the same time, but it's kind of broken up into like a multi-day event. So it's
how much a wise guy. He's got jokes. He's got jokes now.
All right, so we have a very simple question from Karen. She asked me to read it for you guys. It's beautiful in its simplicity. Would you raise taxes?
No. Nope. And you can.
Very good short answer.
Okay, I was just say, may I elaborate? I don't have to, but I could. But yeah, no, I will not.
I was just going to get into how government always raises a fee here, a little tax there, and says, well, it's only $7 here, only $10 there. Before long, it adds up to a lot of money, and I think our citizens and family need as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's their money.
We moved back from California. Jay was a contractor, and we moved back in '93 because we couldn't no longer afford to live, because you had to pay $6,000 right off the bat each year for liability insurance. You had to pay $200 for a permit to do a job in San Diego. You had to pay $75 for La Mesa, $50 for El Cajon was where we lived, the less expensive area. But it didn't matter how small the job was. You had to pay it for a permit every time you did work in the different cities. And the year our son was on a mission, we made $62,000. And the next year, when he was just ready to come home, we only made $10,000, and we would have lost both our homes and everything because we were working for the state rather than working for ourselves.
Yep.
And when we came back, it only cost us. We could insure our motorhome, our work truck, and our other car for the same amount that we could insure just the work truck in California.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we love Utah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay, so we have a follow-up question on this along this same line here from Stephen Phillips. It's kind of on the same line, so I'm going to just bring Stephen on if you want to ask that question. We're just messaging me, Steve. Are you there?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on Utah leading the way on implementing a flat tax system across the board?
So in 2007, we went from a progressive state income tax to a flat TER. It was then 5%. It's a little under, I think it's 4.95% now. And what that is that's a flat tax across the board with a credit for charitable contributions and then a credit for home mortgage interest. So those are two credits. Otherwise, it's flat now. And what we've seen is with that flatter 5%, we've seen it did what it was promised to do. It more revenue arrived, more money was left in people's pockets. the economy did well, and the revenues to the state grew because people made more money. And I attribute that, when you look at that 2007 tax cut, it was $400 million that we were cutting by lowering that 7% progressive down to the 5% flatter tax. And we also took the state tax on food off of food. And what we saw the economy grow, and that created more revenue. So I'm all for the flat tax.
It's great, and it's easier to fill out the forms now too.
Okay, so I've got a question from Doug Heaton. We're going to change the subject a little bit. So Doug, he actually needs to run soon. He has another meeting. Oh, I think we might have just lost him. Darn.
Do you know what his question is? I know, Doug.
Yeah. So his let me see. It was a while ago, so I don't remember what it was, and it's in my thread. So I'd have to look for it. I'll find it though, and we can maybe come back to that later. So we have a question from Paul Kelch. And so one quick reminder, if you have a question and you'd like to ask it on the Zoom, you can click to raise your hand, or if you're on the phones, press *9 to raise your hand. So *9, and you can raise your hands on the phones. So Paul Kelch, are you on right now? Let me see if I can grab your mic here. If I can figure out alphabetical order. There we go. All right. Are you there, Paul?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Hey, Paul.
Awesome. Yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts were on civil forfeiture laws in Utah.
Yeah, so so it was passed by a referendum initiative, I think, and then a couple of years later, the legislature voted to reinstate it. I voted against that. We had at one point asset forfeiture was banned, and the people voted for it, and I supported that. And then there was a bill to reverse that, and it has been reversed. Look, I have friends that are in law enforcement, and I think that the job of law enforcement is one that I know we have a debt of gratitude towards those that put their lives on the line to keep us safe. Public safety is an absolute essential, and I think police officers and law enforcement are getting a bad rap with a lot of people right now, and I think they don't deserve it. My issue with asset forfeiture was that many times people's personal property was being seized before due process ever occurred, without knowing if we're all innocent until proven guilty. But that asset forfeiture was done in a way where that had not been adjudicated yet. And in some cases, I'm not saying it was prevailing, but in some cases, I think there is a profit motive in terms of what you're able to seize and how you're able to seize it. And we don't want that to enter into the fray as well. So I supported the referendum that was passed. That was well over a decade ago. But I supported it, and I didn't support its reversal.
Can I clarify?
Pardon me?
Completely against civil asset forfeiture, so I'm on board with you on that. I am absolutely against. I have friends that are in law enforcement, and they've said it's kind of an HR block for them. So
that's
a
the
great thing,
fear.
I don't think.
Yeah, that's the fear, is that because there's a profit that can become a profit motive involved with that. And so I've had that concern.
Of course, I haven't had to deal with it as much in county government, but to me, it really comes back to this due process question. I think whenever the government exercises its power with its citizens, there needs to be a process for the citizens. And so that's the slippery slope that we have to be watching out for all the time on this issue and a lot of other issues with making sure people have due process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Okay, so we're going to go to our next question from Newell Hales. Newell Hales. Are you there with us?
I'm here.
All right. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, Newell Hales. Yes.
Newell Hales.
No, thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have three issues that I would like to discuss. First of all, I live in Salina, Utah, which is south of the Payson-Dixon line.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so we have a real problem in central Utah in the lack of representation. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but when Utah became a state in 1896, we had 29 counties. Okay. We have 29 state senators.
That's right.
Each county had a state senator. Each county had at least one representative. That was changed by a progressive judge that took our representation away. Right now, our representative, Carl Albrecht, covers 3 counties, and our state senator covers about 5 to 6 counties, which is a way lack of representation. Years ago, I brought this up to Brad Johnson, who was a representative at the time, and he says, well, don't worry about that too much because we have the Cowboy Caucus in southern Utah. Well, and that's all fine and dandy, but there comes a time when Pharaoh no longer remembers Joseph, and that has come. You know, and we have a real lack of representation in central and southern Utah. You know, not so much in St. George and Cedar City because you've got more population there.
But even in my neck of the woods, you know, there's 5 representatives and 2 senators for Washington and Iron County. There's 23 representatives for Utah County alone. So, you know, I understand exactly.
It's a real problem, you know, especially for Sevier County, Paiute County, Wayne County, Garfield County, Kane County, Emery County, Grand County, you know, Millard County, Juab, Sanpete. You know, we lack representation. And case in point, well, 2 cases in point, okay? We live, and this has to do with water. We live in a desert state, okay? Years ago, an unelected bureaucrat, state engineer, water engineer, closed the Sevier River drainage system for new wells being and you know, down in St. George, you have the same problem getting water, okay? But we do have water in Sevier County, but they won't let us drill a well, okay? Yeah. And that partly has to do with the Cox Decree, which is 100 years outdated. And we have new technology for irrigation and that kind of stuff. So those kind of decisions need to be made by elected officials and not by an unelected bureaucrat, which that decision that closed the Sanpete or the Sandpitch and Sevier River drainage systems to no more drilling has got to be changed. The other thing, last year in your state legislature, another representative on the Wasatch Front, I think it was Salt Lake County, got a bill passed concerning secondary irrigation systems. And that is putting a meter on everybody's secondary water systems. Okay, so here's another problem that affects Salt Lake County or the Wasatch Front. There's a problem with those people, but yet it got passed through the whole state. Now I'm on the city council here in Salina, and now we're going to be mandated to buy secondary meters. We're going to be mandated to buy meters for our secondary water system that we cannot afford. And it is a problem, and it needs to be reversed.
If I could answer this, I do believe that they've kind of stretched that out, but I totally understand what you're talking about. You know, my water in my community comes from the Virgin River, and if you think Sevier water is dirty, you ought to see the Virgin River water. You know, you put those meters on right now, it would cost the little community of Laverkin, I believe, about $2 or $3 million. They wouldn't read the meters, and the meters would immediately be defective because of the water and all of the particles that you have in the water. So it is to your point, though. I think your point is that we're a large state. What fits up here along the Wasatch Front, they were looking and they were thinking about the Weber area when they were talking about those meters, and it was good logic. They figured if we let secondary people know how much water they're going to use, they're going to conserve it. And that's fine, but taking a statewide approach is not fine, and it's going to cost little communities. I don't know if Salina owns your secondary system or if you have an irrigation company, but you're just like Laverkin. It's going to cost you millions of dollars to put on meters that are mandated, and yet it's not going to help at all. And so I think one thing that our ticket brings that we're trying to address the very issues that you're talking about with representation. It's about perspective. I come from the southern end of the state, and I know the Wasatch Front. I'm up here right now. It's being able to come and talk about the challenges that we have, about the infrastructure challenges we have in the rest of the state. I also, prior to serving as county commissioner, I worked for Senator Mike Lee for 3 years as a natural resource advisor, working public land issues. And it gave me the opportunity, because I've lived in Utah my entire life, but to drive and travel every nook and cranny. In fact, I had the opportunity to go to the Sufco mine with Senator Lee and take a tour of that mine. I'll tell you what, it was an experience of a lifetime. I know a lot of people might not think I'm telling the truth when I talk about going in, but anytime you can go 8 miles below ground and see them taking down a wall of coal and recognize what it takes to run an industrialized and wonderful country like ours, and it all comes out of there. So it is about that perspective and about representation. It's one thing that I know that Greg is committed to solving problems, and it does take what I would call an intellectual curiosity of a governor to really dig in and be curious about issues throughout his state to solve these problems. As far as representation at the House, you're right, it's one man, one vote. Right now, I think it's fairly complicated to whether or not we could change it. I know that we've debated it as county officials among ourselves. We've solved that problem several times, but whether we could get it to hold up in a court of law would be another thing. So anyway.
Yeah, and let me just say, so I was, before we got into this whole social distancing, I was holding town halls in January, February, first part of March. This issue came up, and I don't know, I'm going to have to look at it, but you are exactly right that the metering secondary water, especially if there's not a fiscal note with it giving you the money to be able to do it, it's a nice thing to say by statute, but practically speaking, how could you afford to even be able to do something like that? I thought they had changed that legislation, that it did not require that. I'll look into it, but I'll tell you what, I hear what you're saying, and I absolutely know that the water management throughout this whole state, you cannot take the situations or the issues related to the Wasatch Front and suggest that that's how you would address them statewide. And I think it's to your point, the more that your state Senate and your House are represented by population and not having, 29 seats in the Senate, it's not a coincidence with 29 counties. That's the way it was. To lose that type of representation every redistricting year, you lose that. You're losing that perspective that, you would hear otherwise. Hey, who's going to pay in a small county to meter the secondary water? I'm willing to work with the counties and say, let's push on that. I think that decision was back in 1963 out of California or something. It makes no sense to have a United States Senate with 2 U.S. senators representing every single state. In Wyoming, you have 2 U.S. senators and you have 1 member of the House of Representatives.
Exactly.
The House member, based on population, there's 1, and then you have 2 U.S. senators in Wyoming. I don't know how we got to a place where the practice of our U.S. Senate is not a constitutional way to proportion our senators across the state. Because here's the other part, and it's what we've been talking about. We keep having our young people leave our rural communities trying to find a job up in the Wasatch Front. The problem you're describing is perpetuated when you're hyper focused on all your water infrastructure, road infrastructure, rail infrastructure, job growth, everything inside of 4 counties. You lose more population from the rest of the state. Therefore, you lose that representation. So we're talking about changing that trajectory and bringing population back by creating that economic opportunity. But I will say this, I like the idea that we would go back to that, because this next redistricting, I think it's even worse.
It gets worse.
I think that redistricting is coming up. I mean, I got my census envelope in the mail recently. So we're going to go through a whole new redistricting cycle. And I think that the rural side gets even less representation. That's not going to work. So we need to do 2 things. I'd like to challenge that. I'd love to check the temperature of a court and ask them with a straight face how our U.S. Senate operates that way, but we can't operate our state Senate that way. but then we need to start pushing. This whole state as a state has to grow now, and then that population come back.
It all happened during the Constitutional Convention of 1787, when the small states such as Rhode Island, Connecticut, they wouldn't adopt the Constitution because of the large states of Virginia and Pennsylvania and New York. Yep. They wouldn't adopt it, so they came up with the Connecticut Compromise, based at the Senate represented the geographical areas, and the House represented by population. And that was a Republican form of government. And when Utah became a state, we were guaranteed a Republican form of government, which has been taken away from us by a progressive liberal judge.
Yep.
Not by legislation, not by vote. It was by a judge's decision, which was unconstitutional and illegal. And basically it shouldn't stand. And, it's just not right.
So I'll just make this final plea. You're looking at a ticket that understands what you're talking about. You got a county commissioner here. He led the Utah Association of Counties. We're talking about how we're bringing that infrastructure play to the whole state. But I'm also a ticket that doesn't get into that primary without getting through this convention. So we'd love to earn your vote, and we'd love to earn your support so we can take this exact message you're talking about and bring it into the primary.
All right, thank you. We appreciate that question. Great discussion on that. That's kind of an interesting one. You don't get every day. So here's another one we might not get every day too. We're gonna go to Claren. Let me see if I can find you. Claren Twitchell. I'm gonna unmute Claren here. He has kind of it's an interesting, some might think it's radical take on education. Let's see. Let's open this up for a discussion. It should be an interesting one.
Okay, well, since we spent a noble subject of taking away our senators from our state senators from our county, this is kind of related to that sort of thing. Is when we were required to do a number of things to become a state that were totally against what we believed in the state, but we couldn't be a state unless we did those things. And one of them was government schools. So government being in the school business is entirely outside the proper role of government. Government schools are based on compulsion, compulsory funding, and compulsory attendance. Government owning businesses is socialism. Will you support an amendment to the Utah State Constitution to get Utah out of the school business?
Yeah, so let me go baby steps on this one, because I will always answer every question straight up, but I'm gonna tiptoe this one a little bit. So let me just start with the federal Office of Education. That's a much easier one for me to digest. I do think that their role, I've watched them. I even watched the Bush administration come to the state of Utah very heavy-handed with No Child Left Behind and threaten our Title I dollars if we didn't go along with it. And so the federal role is particularly an affront to our education system. It highlights what you're saying about whether government involvement is a role of government. It is in our state constitution, so it would require an amendment, because in our constitution it says that we are, by our state constitution, guaranteeing every child a free, available public education. I can tell you that I'm not ready to abolish public education as in the state. If I were to predict how that, because all those constitutional amendments go through the vote of the people, I don't know that would pass. But I think that the debate and the issue that you're bringing up and the role that government has, and if it is the best way to deliver education to kids, I think that's why I kind of go to that whole parental choice, empowering the parents and the kids through and I know it's a wimpier version of what you're talking about. I know yours is the bold, bright line. And I'm kind of, when I talk parental choice, it's not that, that bright line, but I do think, I want to see those options to give at least the options where everyone doesn't feel they have to go to that public school. So you have that individualized education, you have that I call it backpack funding, where there's some funding that helps empower parents and students to get their education. And look, I think more homeschooling. How many of these parents in this COVID-19 process where they're helping their kids hopefully through school, maybe it ignites a passion for parents to be involved, and we see more homeschooling going on. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be your traditional public school. So I'm not ready to support an amendment to end public education in the state, but I am telling you that the federal role I don't subscribe to, and I do think that the parental choice in education is what I do support.
Well, thanks
Yeah,
for the baby.
I think it really comes back to kind of expanding school choice and giving parents opportunities. And not every child is the same. Not every family's need is the same. I know, for example, in my family, my wife, we've homeschooled our 5 children, but it's been a combination. I mean, our kids have been homeschooled, but at the same time, we've enrolled them and gotten them involved in athletics and sports and clubs at the high school. And it takes a lot of work to homeschool, by the way. I think a lot of parents during this COVID-19 are starting to realize how hard my wife works. Every once in a while she'd get the call like, hey, can you come and do something? You're not doing much. She's like, what do you mean? I'm in the middle of homeschooling. But I think parents do need those choices because our kids are different and they have different needs, and one size fits all is not a successful approach to education. So I guess I would be the same as Greg, meet you halfway there and continue to have a vibrant discussion about Utah education and about school choice and opportunities. And frankly, I think Utah has come a long ways. And I'd credit Greg to that and some of the fights that the legislature had in bringing about a charter school program. And also there's resources that my school district provides to homeschoolers where they can enroll in different extracurricular programs. They can receive certain online schooling courses if they need it. And so all of those have been very helpful to my family and to other families that are looking for different educational opportunities for the kids.
Well, thank you for the baby step reply.
Sorry. I knew what you were looking for, but I couldn't get there all the way. But I'm being honest with you. I'm shooting straight. I'll tell you the truth every time.
I'm just planting the thought in your mind because nobody's thought about it for about 130 years.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's definitely a topic worth discussing. I really do.
Yeah, there was 3 things in the Utah State Constitution. They're really, really huge when we were forced to accept them. And like right now, we've totally forgot that we were forced to accept it because we're just like everybody else now. But it was like our religious freedom was taken away. We couldn't have more than one wife. That was a religious freedom issue. We were forced to have free government schools. We didn't want that, and we were forced to do it. And we were forced to say, okay, we will never ask for our land back from the government, from the federal government. And so those 3 things were just totally, we had to say, okay, are we going to never be a state, or are we going to accept those 3 things?
Yeah, it's so good, and especially hedging the bet on the land. I mean, 67% of the land of the state of Utah. Then you get in these rural counties, you're looking at 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95% of that land federally owned and managed land in a county. You can hardly call it a state when those percentages are that high. So those are really good points. I appreciate you bringing those up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clarence. I could just feel that was going to be a good discussion just from the first message from him. So that was an interesting one. That was an interesting one. All right. So we have another question. We have a Sandra Dutson. Is that right? Sandra Dutson. I've got your hand raised here. So I'm bringing you off of mute. If you'd like to ask your question, you're on here with Greg and Victor.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just want to right off the top tell Greg that he's got me in his hind pocket. I'm going to vote for him. And
thank you.
And you're not going to talk me out of it.
Oh, you are the best. Thank you. I need, you never know. You're looking at this camera. You're hoping you're making, thank you. You've just made my day. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, I mean it.
Thank you.
Okay. So you're not going to believe this, but there are actually people out there who are talking smack about you.
Hey, you know what? It comes
can't
with the
stand it.
territory. Yeah, they do. It comes with the territory. I get it a bit. So, what do they say?
Okay.
Tell me.
So I want to give you an opportunity to defend yourself against some things that they're saying.
Okay. I appreciate
And so it has to do with the inland port.
Okay.
And there are a few people that think that you support it because you're going to make a lot of money. And so what I've been told is, number one, the Chinese own the land for the inland port, and you're in cahoots with the Chinese.
Yeah.
And you're going to work with them to take over Utah. And you and the Chinese are going to own the inland port.
Yeah.
And you have also donated to the CCP.
Yeah. Okay. This actually, Sandra, I love this. Was a more colorful one. I mentioned somebody
This
asked.
story keeps getting
No,
better.
it
Like
really
it's
does.
richer and richer.
No, but I know what they're talking about though. This is really good because here's the thing. I had a question earlier in this town hall where, do you own the land? But you can insert whatever policy issue I've worked on. Do you own land? If you work on Operation Rio Grande, do you own land there? If you're moving the prison, do you own land there? If you work on inland port, you must own the land there. The Chinese angle is the new one, but that's kind of cool. That's a new one to answer to. The answer is I'm not doing it. None of this is for profit in any way, shape, or form. I don't own any land, and I don't have any profit motive in this. And I think there's two motivations behind accusations like that. One is there's people that don't want change. They don't want to see something change, and they want to tap into people's cynicism about politicians. And so they will say that. I think the other one is that fundamentally people don't if they see you get passionate about something, they don't understand why. Yep. The passion inside of public policy, it leads people. I mean, there's people that want to say they must be in for it for themselves because they want to stop it. That's one reason. But the other one is I think people are caught off guard when you get really passionate about issues, and I think that there is this cynicism related to it. So there's no Chinese connection. Let me tell you that there is a connection to the Liaoning province in China and the state of Utah. That's a province to state relationship that started, I want to say, I don't know, when was Speaker Curtis the speaker? Well, it's at least 12, maybe 14 years ago. And what it is it was 1 year, Utah's state delegation goes to China, and we go to the province of Liaoning, and we meet with their provincial leaders, which their provinces are the equivalent of a state. And so we have this, we go into meetings, we talk about trade, we talk about education. We have dual immersion schools in Utah. A lot of our students are learning Mandarin Chinese really by a higher number than you see other states. And so there's an interest that China has. And by the way, the reason President Trump is fighting so hard for fair trade and a fair trade agreement with China is because they got 400 million in their middle class, in their buying class. And it's been a one-way street with that country where anything we try to send over there to that buying class, middle class, they tariff the daylights out of, and then they come to our country and they get zero by way of tariffs. And President Trump sees there is us exporting manufacturing or anything into that country it would be profitable for our country. So he's been saying to China, not, we're going to send you away and don't ever do business with us. He's saying, hey, we want a two-way street. You're going to either get tariffs when you come to our country, or you're going to lower your tariffs when we come to yours. He's doing that because there is some smarts to us getting our coal, our natural resources, our hay, our alfalfa, our manufacturing into that country. So when we have these sister province to state relationships, there are years where we'll go over there and meet with them, and then the next year they come here and they meet with us. And as Speaker of the House, you, with the Senate President, you lead that delegation. So when I was elected Speaker of the House by my colleagues, I became the leader of our Utah delegation with our Senate President. So it's just a ceremonial thing. It's a diplomatic thing. You you give them a little you give them like a little, I think we did this beehive, jar or something. And then one year, President Niederhauser and I, they love basketball, China. So we went and got a jazz basketball, gave it to them. And then we do actually meet with their central government in Beijing. And usually that meeting, we meet with the ambassador for the United States that's in Beijing, but then the U.S. consul as well. But then we meet with China and we say, look, we want trade. We want our coal. We want our natural resources in Utah. We want you to buy them. We want to be trade partners. We think there's partnerships that way. So that's the relationship with China, but that's on the macro. I don't have any personal business interests. And that was that relationship and going, with that province in China and then, going from their country and our country, that was the role of the speaker. And the current speaker has that role right now as well. So no conspiracy, but that's just one of the jobs that I've done as speaker.
That's like a much less interesting
I know. I was
answer
just
than
gonna say.
for.
I was just gonna say maybe I'm
Can
a
you just
spy
like
or
tease a little
something.
something out next time?
Can I
like
be a
just
spy or I was never mind. I want to joke about it, but in politics I'll joke and then someone will say I'm being serious.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I gotta quit.
Thank you for that question,
But Sandra, thank you for sharing that. Is there any other conspiracy theories I can clear up?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, yeah. Sandra, if you heard any more, I mean, that was a good one. The China one, I've heard a lot of these because it's just kind of the same story, just different topic. But I always joke, I own more land that I don't own than anyone you've ever met in the state of Utah.
So you're trying to tell me that you have not contributed to the CCP?
No, ma'am, I have not. I've not.
All right. Well, that's awesome. So you've given me, you've helped me out a little.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
I don't even know if I'd give them the gift. I'm so ornery about Wuhan right now. I don't even know if I'd give them that diplomatic gift if you're asking. Okay, I'm a little bit salty about that whole thing. So even if I was still speaker, I don't know. I might be holding back on the little
withheld the beehive.
Yeah, the little beehive jar we were given. I might not give it to him right now. I'm a little bit bugged by what's going on here. So anyway.
Well, good. I just want you to know we support you and we're doing a lot of campaigning for you.
Sandra, I can't thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Commissioner Iverson, I thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, we're going to go to our next question from Rachel Walton. Rachel, whatever your question is, if you can just insert the CCP into it somewhere, that would be great. That would be... It makes it much more interesting. I'm thoroughly entertained here tonight. So, all right, Rachel, you're on.
Okay, well, I have to plead ignorance insofar that I don't even know what the heck CCP is.
Oh, I love this. You're great. Is it just the central government in China is what the CCP is? Yeah, you know what? It's not really an issue. You don't have any need to know what that is. So but it's fun. It's amazing what a good gubernatorial race can bring up by way of questions. It's good.
Well, don't get me off on China right now. That's
I know. I just said I'm a little salty on the topic myself.
Yeah, we're all feeling that right now.
Well, thank you for taking this question. But I'm curious. Last month, the governor of Idaho made national headlines when he signed a bill prohibiting transgender persons from changing the gender marker on their birth certificate. If you become governor and the legislature presented you with a similar bill prohibiting that change, would you sign it, thus agreeing with it, or would you veto it, opposing it?
So I don't know a whole lot about these transgender. The quick answer is based on the premise and the way you've described it, I would support a bill like that. But I do want to leave room that this is an issue that I've been asked a lot of questions about that I fundamentally don't understand. Like I used to think that transgender meant you were born maybe with, the plumbing of both male and female. I mean, I don't know how to say it in a nice way or a family friendly way. But then I was told, no, that's not it. It's actually what you think you are versus what your what biology's what you are by
yeah
so anyway I would say that by the way you described it, I would support that legislation. I would just, sometimes I just feel like, what am I missing here? It's so out of my realm of understanding that, is there something I'm not getting here? I mean, if your gender is nothing more than just a verbal affirmation, I don't know how sports, I don't know how locker rooms, I don't know how anything works. I don't get it. I just don't even get how allowing it
think that
happens.
Would you then?
I think that a lot of
to
students.
learn about the issue before you made that decision?
Pardon me?
Would you attempt to learn to get answers to those questions that you have just?
Yes, and that's why I say that on the premise that you described, I would say I could support that bill in Idaho, but I did leave myself the room to understand a little more, because I honestly don't get it. I really don't. I'm not trying to be, argumentative or funny. I don't understand that. I don't even understand how it works. I've heard this even,
I do not. I would like to talk a little on that.
Can we get your name?
Your mic's not on, Gregory.
Can we get your name real quick? Sorry.
I do
What
not
was your
think
name?
that gender. I don't think that the kids should be allowed to change their gender until they're an adult in their 18,
Yeah,
19
I concur
years.
with that.
Because I have worked in the school, and I worked with a little girl that was beautiful, and she was pushed by her adoptive family to change from a girl to a boy. And when they start doing mastectomies and these surgical things, which we have to pay for with taxes and through the Medicare or Medicaid, it is just not right, because there is more suicide amongst those transgenders than the average kids. And it's just not right to be pressuring those kids to become girls when they're boys and boys when they're girls. When they're over 18,
that's not the question. So you're on the phone. I think you've gotten through our mute thing. Who is this? Is this my ombudsman? Is this who this is? Is this Janet from before, or is this someone?
This is Jan Starkey again.
Yeah, this is Jan Stokey. So Jan, I don't know that was the question that was asked. I appreciate that input. The question that was just left.
Idaho.
Yeah, the question that was asked about would I support or veto that bill, on the quick premises it's been described, I would support that, but I do leave myself the room to better understand this issue, because I genuinely, and I'm talking on the adult side, I don't understand that, and so it's an issue that's coming pretty fast.
Yeah.
Commissioner Iverson, I don't know if you have what your take is there, but it's an issue that I was in the legislature for 16 years, and we just there wasn't a lot of, I didn't grapple with this issue then. And I only finished at the end of 18. It's not like that was a long time ago.
Well, my question had to do then, but before the other party stepped in, did not have anything to do with.
You don't understand.
Hang on one moment.
Let's Ms. Stokey, we can't have you over talking over the other people that are participating. We have someone who's got the floor. If they could, the one that was asking a question, if they could ask.
Rachel Walton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, that is a whole separate issue. There are a number of issues regarding this, and just answer quickly her comment. It's not the high suicide rate among transgenders, which there are, but it's the LGBT community in general, and especially the youth of the LGBT community, for a number of reasons. But my question then is, if you've answered it, and I appreciate it, if you ever did get that, I would hope that you would make an in-depth inquiry before you made that decision. Thank you.
I would. I will tell you I would, and not knowing where anyone stands on that issue, I answered it honestly, and I did want to give that space to understand the issue better than I do right now. I will admit to you, I don't.
The one thing that I really appreciate about Greg is is the intellectual curiosity that he brings to different issues. And this is an issue that's complex. It involves sensitivity to where people are at, families, and it does require somebody as a governor or policymaker to really kind of dig in and be willing to measure all sides on it. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
All right, another great discussion there. We're going to go to Stephen Phillips for, I think this is going to be our final question of the night. We might be able, if you shoot me a message or raise your hand on the phones, we might be able to get one more in after this, depending on the length of the discussion, and then we're gonna end for the night. So, Stephen, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, or give it a shot here. All right, I tried to unmute Stephen. There we go.
Thank you.
I think
I
you're
appreciate that. And you know, foreign exchange students, back to education here for just a second. Foreign exchange students bring a lot of revenue into our schools and support revenue of many private schools in the area. You know, how are you going to help those schools have new students next year with President Trump shutting down immigration and the ability to obtain those visas? You know, him shutting that down today. How can you help us?
So I'll tell you what I think. It's a good question. I haven't thought of it before you've asked it, but this is my first blush answer. There have been in the area of trade, where there's been this trade. I hate to call it a trade war because it sounds so dramatic. I like to call it a trade dispute, and I think that the president's negotiations with China have been appropriate in terms of making sure that life's a two-way street. What we found, though, and what has happened even in the state of Utah, is that in that trade dispute, you'll see that China will look to raise the tariff in a punitive way, even higher than the tariffs they're charging on exports, things that we are already exporting. And then there's the same thing happening coming in, where there are family businesses that depend on what's being imported from China that were being impacted. And what's happened in the way of trade in terms of those negotiations is there have been particular waivers that could be brought before the administration with certain circumstances related to those waivers that they could get, so that the broad brush diplomacy, or I think in the case of President Trump, where he's looking at slowing the flow or stopping immigration, it's the same issue about the spread of COVID-19 or how that's working. I think that you can get waivers in this administration. And I think of any administration, I know that I personally, as Speaker of the House, was able to go to Health and Human Services and obtain waivers for the state of Utah. We had this, to give you an example, there's a HUD requirement that you can't have more than 17 treatment beds in a single standing building facility for drug addiction. Think about opioids and opioid addiction. There was no way that the state of Utah was going to be able to help people who were so crippled with addiction with this opioid epidemic that's hit us, where we had to have treatment beds, only 17 beds at a time. That is a national requirement, federal requirement. I was able to go, and I called ahead and said, look, I'm occupying HHS till you see me. You can't do this to our state. We got to get more than 17 beds a building. We got to do it. We got too many people so addicted to these opioids, and now they're trying to turn to heroin. We got to help people. I was able to, and we were able to get that waiver, and it's an important waiver. It might not sound like a big deal, but it was an incredibly big deal to say we could have more than 17 treatment beds. And so when you ask that question, Stephen, my mind goes to when you have those unique relationships in education, where we do enhance the educational experience, not only for the foreign exchange students that come to our state, but what our schools benefit from by having those students. I believe unique waivers can be found within those broad administration policies. And I've done it before. I've done it. That's one example of where I've done it. I've worked with West Jordan on airport number 2. There was an FAA rule that was just killing that city, and they couldn't get someone on. I mean, the federal rule didn't apply to West Jordan and airport number 2. I was fortunate enough to be able to reach Secretary Chow, who's the head of Department of Transportation. And for the first time in West Jordan City's history, they had someone from FAA from Washington, D.C. come to the city of West Jordan and speak to them specifically about their issue related to the airport number 2 in their city. I worked on that. And I worked on that because I have a good relationship with this administration. So to answer your question, it would be and I could do it a lot easier from the perch of governor than I could as the Speaker of the House. I was fortunate to do it where I sat, but the governors, there's only 50 governors in this state, in this country. And as the governor, I do believe we could get smart waivers to make sure we're not interrupting the educational experiences of our schools with foreign exchange kids.
Yeah, because revenue of private schools is really taking a hit because of this COVID thing. And this is just going to exacerbate the issue with not being able to enroll students next year. All of a sudden, you've taken that whole segment of revenue out of both the public and the private school sector, and it's really hurting. I think economically that we haven't even begun to think about, and it's going to be months out.
Why can't it be online registration?
Well, I think right now what Stephen was talking to is the decree that was announced today that the basically immigration is going to be seriously hampered, if not closed. And so, yeah, to your point, I think what you have in Governor Hughes would be somebody who could work very closely with the administration and get those waivers that'll be necessary. But it was my understanding, of course, I watched the same news sources that everybody else did, is that this is a fairly temporary ban.
Yeah.
That it's really meant to address what we're dealing with as a country right now. So.
Okay, so let's see, my mic's on. I had like a paranoia panic attack for a second. All right, we have one final question we're gonna go to. We're gonna go to Mike Olson. And then after Mike Olson, we're just gonna let Greg and Victor close, and then that's gonna be it for the night. And we'll be back tomorrow. We'll be hanging out all day answering questions probably, and then we'll do another town hall in the evening. So Mike, if you're there, I've got you unmuted here, so you can ask your questions to Greg and Victor.
Thank you for your time. Hey, I'm interested what your stance is on JRI.
Justice Reinvestment Initiative, JRI. So look, I was speaker in 2015. I support it. I supported it. It goes back to this idea that we have such a crisis in an opioid addiction, which turned into heroin addiction. The understanding that most people that enter our jails and our correctional facilities come back out. We have a recidivism rate where more than 65% of those that would leave would find their way back in without that trajectory of self-reliance. And so we were looking for smarter ways to help people that might be sick, and it might start in jail, and it might be that wake-up call. But how do we get people the help they need if they're committing crimes because they're sick, not because that they're criminals per se? And we worked really hard on that legislation. And I'll tell you that we passed it in 2015, and we did have support of county attorneys and others as we worked through it. But we knew it was a big piece of reform, and what we did not want to do is just shift, just say we're reforming something, but all we're doing is it's an unfunded mandate down to the counties, or saying a felony is now a Class A misdemeanor, and then leaving all of the responsibility or cost to the counties and the county jails. And so there was a hefty fiscal note. That's what we call it when a bill or a reform has a cost to it. The state pays that. So we passed that in 15. I was the speaker in the 16, 17, and 18 sessions. And the Association of Counties, I kept saying, they'd come with an invoice saying, here's the unintended consequence, Hughes, to this reform. It costs this to help implement this program in a way that isn't an unfunded mandate. I swear to you, I paid the bill every year. I paid the invoice every year to make sure that the unintended consequences were not borne on the counties, the county sheriffs, or the county attorneys. And I have, as a candidate, have heard from the sheriffs that there's a high frustration with JRI, and that the Sentencing Commission is lowering some felonies down to misdemeanors that are crimes related with guns, things that are completely outside of what the legislative intent was for JRI. But then I run into some counties where I think it is working well, and there are some great success stories. So what you get out of me as your governor is someone who will get to the bottom of this, who has a deep respect for our sheriffs and our law enforcement, our county attorneys, but also wants to make sure that we are incarcerating those and with programming and what we need with those that need to be in jail with appropriate penalties attached, and then those that are part of this epidemic of opioid addiction and what it turns into and how can we get that treatment as well. Sometimes it's those issues overlap, sometimes we can deal with them separately, but I will work on that to continue to make sure that JRI, justice reform, I believe in the spirit of that and what we did, but where we have to fix it and where we have to get people around the table and find the solution on how to do it, you have my commitment that I will. Look, I feel ownership to it. I don't want to leave the state worse than I found it. My whole point in public service is to leave the state better than I found it.
If I could jump in here really quick, Mike, as a county commissioner, working with our county attorney and also our courts down there, we have a pilot program under JRI known as court support services. So when somebody is booked with one of those charges that fell under JRI, we immediately do an assessment. We try to recognize their risk of reoffense and any sort of treatment options that might be available. Then we take that information and with their legal defense and with the prosecutor and the judge involved, create some sort of a legal agreement so that we can get them help rather than keep them in jail. We've been doing that about 1.5 years, and we're starting to collect a lot of data. We're working with the state. The state is quite enthusiastic. One of your colleagues, Eric Hutchins, is very enthusiastic about the work we've been doing down in Washington County. So JRI is going to require a continued partnership with counties and sheriffs and county prosecutors to make sure it works right. But I think we're all in agreement with the spirit of JRI, which is that we need to get people treated rather than jail is not going to substitute for getting them the treatment and help. There are some people that belong in jail, of course, but when you're talking about a young 18-year-old that's the first time through, we really need to get them out. We need to get them in some treatment. We need to get them graduated from high school, get them some training, and we've had good success in Washington County with it.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. I if you're asking that question,
thank you.
I imagine that you have some perspective there or some experience with it.
I would imagine you're in law enforcement or in treatment provider or in your county attorney's office.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for the question.
Yep.
All right, so that's all the questions that we have for tonight. So we're going to let Greg and Victor just close it up here real quick, and then we're going to let everybody go about your way. I know that you're getting bugged like crazy as delegates. We appreciate your service. Don't get too mad at us when we send you a couple more texts and try and call you a couple more times this week. That's it's going to happen, and we just appreciate the patience, and it'll all be over soon, even though you didn't sign up for it this time.
Well, I just want to echo those sentiments that I appreciate all of you as delegates, kind of putting up with all the texts, being willing to get on and talk to us. We talk about this year and how interesting it is, this COVID-19, and how usually we would be going up and down the state. We'd be meeting in parks. We'd be having lunches with you, passing out snow cones, having these visits. And frankly, I'm really kind of bummed out that we don't get that opportunity. It feels a little awkward, but what I really do appreciate is all of you being willing to put in the time. We're the only ticket that chose from the very beginning not to do signatures, and it wasn't out of any sort of rationale other than we believe in this process. We believe in you as delegates, your ability to vet the candidates, to weigh in, to really assess this. What you have in this ticket is the conservative ticket. It's a bold conservative leadership. That's what we offer. And frankly, I think that's what we're going to what we desperately need as we look at the shutdown and we look at our economic challenges. But challenges, Utah has so many opportunities, and I really see the opportunity to move prosperity across this state and to be kind of a Utah unified ticket. It doesn't matter where you're calling in from, whether you're rural or whether you're from up here on the Wasatch Front. I'm excited to support Greg Hughes for governor. I frankly think he brings that problem solving, intellectual curiosity, bold leadership that I've always appreciated in a leader of our state.
Thank you, Commissioner. I hope you see why I'm honored and proud to have Commissioner Victor Iverson on the ticket with me. I'll echo what he said. This is a ticket with demonstrated ability. We have been public servants. We're in this to make a difference, and we don't just have positions that we want to share going forward. You can look at the work that we have done and see measurables and see that what we say matches the work that we have done. And this is what I'll say about that, especially in the times that we're in right now. And I hope, man, look, you're our gatekeeper. We don't go into this primary without your support, without your permission. That's the way I wanted it. That's the way I like it. And that's why I appreciate you being on this call and on this video tonight. But if you get us to that primary, if we have that opportunity to continue this debate and continue this campaign, hopefully we're going to see a time where we can meet in crowds and we can feel that energy and have something that's more than just this social distancing. But this is what I'll tell you. We've talked about a lot of important issues tonight, and I think we are in surreal and unprecedented times. What it is going to take to navigate this state and see the prosperity and see us continue to move forward as the state has, it's going to take leadership. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple Computer, said, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. Well, this is not a ticket that sells ice cream. We're here to tell you the truth. We're here to talk about the hard things. We'll tell you that government can't be all things to all people, but the sky is truly the limit for this state. We will be the state that emerges out of this pandemic and this crisis, one of the first, if not the first, because tough times don't last, but tough people do. And that is Utah's history and heritage. But we'll do it because we've told you the truth, because we've fended off the free federal money and all the strings that are attached. We've done it because we've been conservatives and we found common ground with those, with the issues that we see in the budget gaps that are coming. We'll do it because we are battle tested. We have been attacked by liberal media. We have had the special interest groups attack us and threaten our elections in our time of public service. And actually, Commissioner Iverson, as soon as he joined the ticket, he got the liberal media going after him once he got on board. So we have lived through that. We've seen the fear that can be contagious in public service or in public policy with your colleagues or your staff as the heat gets turned up. And as you talk to every candidate who's asking for your support, if you ask them what they'll do, if they're going to get down on the ground, be specific about the issues, just not talking platitudes or sell ice cream, but be specific. Those specifics will rattle the status quo. And when it does, they will feel those attacks that I just described. And they won't be able to tell you how they will react to a media, to special interest groups, to Twitter storms and social media, to fear, if they've not lived through it themselves. What I can tell you is that I am undaunted and I don't buckle. And this team doesn't buckle. We will do the hard things. We will do it together. And I am telling you that together we will do great things and we will get it done. So thank you for being on this video with us tonight. Our big paranoia is that we're just not going to get to meet everyone. So please pass the word. Please encourage other delegates. We're sorry if you get a lot of phone calls or texts or emails from us. We're just trying our very, very hardest in this election cycle to have these types of conversations. These don't happen as frequently in primaries or general elections. This is where the rubber hits the road. So please, if we didn't answer your questions, come back and please pass the word. And we hope to earn your support. We need your support. Thank you for joining us.